Sunday Ramble episode 4. I believe that this is the fourth time that I've done this. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I'm going to be rambling for a little bit about a few things, and I'm just going to get right into it. First off, Tommy Robinson in the UK. This is crazy, guys. And people are talking about it, but they're not really talking about it in a lot of detail, and it's because it's literally illegal for them to talk about it. There has been a gag order in the UK put upon journalists and, I guess, YouTubers and anybody that might want to talk about this, and Tommy Robinson was basically wrongfully jailed and sentenced to prison for filming outside of a court, and it had to do with the Muslim grooming gangs that have been around for, I guess, decades now, and they've been finally going to trial. Apparently, the police kind of knew about this, and they weren't really doing anything about it for a long time, and then now there's finally trials. And if people don't know who Tommy Robinson is, he is a white, working-class British person. That's kind of how he's marketed. He's, the people's hero or whatever. And I don't know that much about him, so it would be a lie for me to speak too much about who he is. But he's marketed as kind of like the white, working-class British people's champion. He's trying to champion the rights of British citizens who are majority white, to be perfectly honest, and not necessarily Muslims. There is a drastically strange bias system in favor of hate speech things that give preferential treatment to Muslims over in the UK. It's just true. And there's a lot of very, very strange things, like that the mayor of London is a Muslim. And, I'm sure conspiracy theorists probably think that he's an Islamist, and there's a lot of actions that this guy has taken, or at least things that, I wouldn't say actions, I would say that certainly inactions, things that have been happening in London over and over that theoretically the mayor should put a stop to, and he just doesn't do anything about it at all, and it's very strange, such as maybe the Muslim rape gangs. And what's another example? Oh, the radicalization of Muslim people at certain mosques. We know that certain people go to certain mosques and then they become radical jihadists, and nobody really cares and tries to put a stop to it, apparently. And this is all happening on the mayor's watch in London. And what is that woman's name? I think it's Katie Hopkins. She's kind of like a female Milo Yiannopoulos. She describes Great Britain right now as being two parts. There's the majority of Great Britain, which are the people that voted for Brexit, and then she calls it Londonistan. And Londonistan is, the way that she describes it is as if it's almost some sort of a Muslim aristocracy almost that's trying to order around everybody else, and it's subject to much influence from the EU, and oh god, all of this stuff is going on. And one of the things that people say this, I'm pretty sure, but a lot of Americans maybe aren't really aware of when they really think about Great Britain. London is kind of like New York, Washington, D.C., and L.A. all rolled into one. So it's the financial capital, the political capital, and the entertainment capital of the UK. So if the mayor there is a Muslim guy that just doesn't care about Islamic extremism, which seems to become more and more evident, it's what it looks like, then that's really, really bad. And Tommy Robinson is one of these guys that's saying, no, enough is enough. I'm going to stand up. I don't care what people say about me. And one of the things that he does is he tries to report on these stories that kind of get brushed under the rug, like the grooming gangs. And so he's going to prison because of that. And apparently he didn't really get a trial. And also there's a gag order on even talking about this. So this is a political thing. He is a political prisoner. People suspect that he's almost certainly going to die in jail because of the extremism within the populations within jail, the British prisons. And Sargon had a good video explaining some stories of just how intense the prison gangs actually are. So yeah, I think it's really, really up to us. I made a video about this, how I said, can Americans give British people their free speech? And the idea was that people were being censored and not allowed to say things, like Count Dankula went to trial and has been convicted of hate speech for a joke. So British people already know that they're not allowed to make YouTube videos. Well, Americans, it's up to us to help them out a bit and try to make stuff for them. And I would really, really, really love to see the Sargon video. That's, the sequence of events that has led to Tommy Robinson finding his way in prison. You know how Sargon makes those really great videos with text that he reads over and then video evidence that's a chronological, it's almost like a documentary. He did a really great one called The Mattress Girl Saga about Emma Sokolowitz of Columbia University, who falsely accused a young man, and it got picked up as a international headline, and then it turned out that the whole thing was a lie. If Sargon made a really, really great video about Tommy Robinson, I think that people would know just how important this moment in history really, really is, because this could be a turning point for better or for worse. But Sargon can't do that because he will probably literally go to jail, and he's scared. So maybe I'm going to do it. Maybe I will have to do a whole bunch of research about Tommy Robinson and just make a big, long video compiling, everything that people really need to know about him at the moment, and how big of a deal this will be to the British people if he does end up being murdered in prison. Maybe I should do that, but I will have to get research together, so people could send me some links for stuff that I should start to look at. Maybe I will be more inclined to want to. It'll be a big project because I don't really know that much about it. But I do think that I at least am fairly good at presenting things in a digestible way. I think that that's something I'm all right doing. So yeah, I was talking to some people about this, and this is potentially, this could lead to a war. And the reason that I say this is that, the radical jihadists, their intention is basically one of two things: to either convert the entire world into Islam, which they will try to do, but for the most part, I think that most of them don't really think that that's ever really going to happen, and they'd be happy to just die in the name of trying to spread Islam, because if they die trying to convert people into being Islamic, then they get to go hang out with Allah in heaven, and that's good enough. They have, I don't know, what is it, like 40 virgins that they get to have sex with or whatever. So one of the things that you do in this holy war is, you keep trying to get people, and if they fight back and kill you, well, good enough. You get to go to heaven. So it really, really, really looks like the jihadists are trying to literally instigate the West to fight back and kill a bunch of them, and then they will all get to go to heaven or something. That's kind of what it looks like to me, but I'm no expert about Islam. It's something that I don't really talk about all that much. But man, it is really creepy, and I feel very, very bad for the British people. I hope that they are doing all right, and I hope that this ends up kind of blowing over to a certain degree. Hope that maybe he gets released. Knock on wood. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is this concept, based around how we do have free speech in America to a certain degree. People are always trying to take it away, especially leftists at the moment, at least. Leftists are obsessed with trying to take it away. They are coming up with every little loophole that they can imaginable and thinking to themselves like, well, free speech only means that the government isn't allowed to, put you in jail. But we can do everything else to take away your free speech, and that's totally fine. So, according to these people, it's totally fine if maybe the Democratic Party pays certain media outlets to lie about people so that they lose their jobs or get evicted from their office spaces or all these different things, and that nobody would want, and it could completely ruin their lives and they might end up homeless entirely. But they're not in jail. That being said, that was one of the first things that was put into our Constitution, as the First Amendment, and our culture has been built around that for hundreds of years based on a foundation of personal liberty and discussion. We have been, as a culture, as Americans, we are able to talk about things and develop our new culture, which has a lot of mixing in it. And one of the things that people say, this is a big trope if you hang out with leftists, like if you go to Seattle or Portland or San Francisco or places like that, a gigantic trope that you hear over and over and over, to the point where people start taking it for granted and thinking that, yeah, that's probably true, is that Americans don't have any culture. I'm not really sure who came up with that and how on earth they decided that they could start telling people that and people would believe them, but that happened. And I was a little bit disappointed, I'm gonna have to say, because I saw this guy that I think that I like pretty well. I don't really know him. We've only talked like once. This guy named Hi, I Think I'm Real. And he seems pretty smart overall. Like, I mostly like him. I've enjoyed a few of his videos, and I think he seems pretty smart. But he made a video about how he isn't sure if there is any such thing as American culture. And he did make a few points that were good, but I think that, and I forget, it was a few weeks ago when I watched it, it's definitely true that due to the massive amounts of differing cultures and different regional cultures that are in America, and America's a very big place. Like, we stretch from one side of the continent to the other, so we are a large country. People should remember that. And also, every country is sort of like that. Like, Mexico itself has different regional cultures. So does Brazil, drastically, by a long shot, which people should not forget. But people have this thing where they say Americans don't have culture, and it's usually black supremacists that are the first to try to bring this up. It's their favorite thing to bring up. I think it's not so much that Americans don't have culture, but they'll say that white people don't have culture. And then they'll and then if you say that white people do have culture in any way, they'll usually say that white people stole all of the culture from black people. That's one of the things that I've heard over the years. It's just something that I've heard. But, okay, it's just not true. It's just not true. There is American culture, and there is also white. First, I'm just going to say two words, and I know this is going to sound trivial, but bear with me. Root beer. Yes, root beer. It is a distinctly American food product, root beer. So much so that if you go over to England, you can't get it. They don't have it anywhere. You have to buy it at an American store, and it's like way overpriced, and everybody there thinks it's gross. They think it tastes like they describe it as tasting somewhat like licorice, and they have no idea why anybody would want to drink a licorice flavored drink. They think it's absurd that we have this thing called root beer, but the vast majority of Americans kind of like root beer. It's not everybody's favorite, but the vast majority of Americans will drink it. So it's something as small as that. Americans don't even realize that it's something that we don't have across the Atlantic with our English-speaking cousins, that we assume that we have everything in common with British people until you go there and you can't get any root beer. And you're like, really? You guys don't have any root beer? Are you serious? There's a lot of things like that. You know, Americans did invent the hamburger. I do believe that apple pie is an American thing. There's a number of other things. All sorts of Southern foods are Americans, like fried chicken and chicken fried steak, biscuits and gravy, I believe. I don't know that well, but yeah, there's a lot of things food-wise that are American. And then you can think about music. The Americana type music is what they're sort of calling it now. Americana music is some combination of folk music, country music, and rock, what we would call rock music now. But what we would call rock music now is not necessarily what rock music used to be. You know, as this is where SJW, black supremacist type people would claim that white people stole rock and roll from black people, which there is a distinct truth to that, but it's a very, very different can of worms if you actually know anything about music and what defined these genres at the time. So what they're saying is that there was a specific type of guitar-driven music that was called rock and roll. But almost all music back then was guitar-driven, you know, like four or five people with a singer and some guitars and a bass, maybe a piano player. That's the vast majority of what music was back then. And there was a specific type of it which black people were playing, and they called it rock and roll. And then there was also country and folk music. Country and folk were what white people were mostly doing. And there was this kind of different black sound, which was rock and roll. And then white people got more into the black sound, and then things started to merge a bit, as things tend to. And then the sounds evolved into something completely different by the 60s. What we were calling rock wasn't the same as this thing that the black people were doing originally. It just was different. It was very, very different. And bands like the Beatles were making rock and roll, but or something that we were calling rock and roll, but it was British, and it was really pop music. So this notion that white people stole rock, no, they ended up settling on this word, rock and roll, to describe guitar-driven band music. But the majority of that stuff is white culture. It really is white American culture, and not entirely. And this is where things become cool. And you have to remember that America is a bit of a melting pot, and that there always have been a lot of great musicians of different backgrounds, largely black and white, that mixed and played together and knew each other, and work together in some capacity or another. There's a great documentary film called 20 Feet from Famous, or 20 Feet from Stardom, or something like that, about the black female backup singers that are in a lot of famous records from the 1960s or so. The one woman who sings in the song Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones, that is a particularly she toured with the Rolling Stones for something like 20 years. So there's a massive amount of American culture that has to do with music. And also, another thing is we have musicals, like Broadway musicals. That is distinctly American. And then we have all of film and entertainment. That is, if you go to other countries, like let's say you were to go and talk to the average, an 80-year-old person in some place somewhere in South America or something. Like you went to some place like Argentina and talked to an 80-year-old person, and you would say, oh yeah, there's no such thing as American culture. They'd be like, are you kidding? I love American movies. You know, My Fair Lady, and you know, they would name all these things, and they would and they'd say like, oh, and then and this food and the music. They would think that they would want you to leave and go back to America so that you could appreciate America a little bit better, as much as they do, because people love American culture. If you go to Japan, they have American restaurants. It'll be like they call it Western restaurants, and it's some sort of like imitation of a cowboy bar, and they might have like a band that plays like weird Western music, and they wear cowboy hats and have burgers and stuff. I've been to Japan, and it's very strange. So yeah, I just don't like that people say that, because it has to be nefarious. Whoever came up with this notion that there's no American culture, whoever said that for the first time, they had to know that they were lying, and it's just nefarious that they've conned so many people into forgetting about all of these things that we do distinctly have as American culture. Last thing that I want to talk about is people who have a bark that is louder than their bite, which is a lot of people. A lot of people. On YouTube, there's a lot of them, with the drama queens, with the people who say a lot of crazy stuff. Yeah, it's usually because they're wrong about everything. Turns out that when you're on the internet and in YouTube, especially, if you're the type of content that I am, and, you know, the skeptics were, the truth tellers, the people that are marketable skill as a channel is not so much that I'm particularly funny, because I'm not really that funny. I know that some people say that I am funny sometimes, and usually it's when I'm not even really trying. I'm no great comedian. I can write scripted stories for other people to read out loud, who will probably sound funnier when they read them out loud than I do, because for whatever reason I'm not. But okay, what I am pretty good at is telling the truth and noticing things and saying, hey, this is what is actually going on. And other people say, yeah, I noticed that too. Thanks for saying so. And sometimes they either didn't notice, they didn't notice it clearly enough to say it themselves, or they weren't putting various pieces together in their heads. And then, but once I did, they can see how that's probably true. And then my predictions tend to come true. Like, you know, my Bloodsport's prediction of how they'd all end up turning on each other like starving piranha. Well, that worked like a charm. So the truth tellers, like the people who, the main thing that we are known for is telling the truth and having integrity. When we deal with people that their main purpose is being provocative and maybe being kind of funny and somehow trying to pwn us and best us, those people's bark is almost always going to be louder than their bite, because they will ultimately, if they were right about something, like if their ideas and their arguments against us, like if they have a problem with us and they're coming at us trying to discredit us and make us look bad, they could just do that. They could just make a video. They don't have to get us into an altercation somehow and embarrass us or whatever. Like, I don't know what type of audience members can't figure that out. Like, people are like, oh, are you scared to face these people? No. if they had something to say to me, they could also make a video, because I have no reason to want to talk to them. And the reason that these people don't make videos is because they have nothing. They have nothing. They just have nothing. They'll bark plenty loud and act like maybe they do, but if they had some good arguments against people, you know, like all these people that come after Sargon about all these things, okay, if you want to make a video about how Sargon is wrong about stuff, because I have before. I have a whole video called, I think it's called Sargon and Francesca Ramsey something and racial. I criticized Sargon for when Sargon talks about the racism in America and systemic racism in America, he basically kind of tries to act like it doesn't exist, and that the only problem that the black community faces in the United States is fatherlessness. And I made a long video saying that I don't think that that is entirely true. I think that there's other factors that we could look into, and that I thought that he might be undereducated about it. I didn't try to say that he was wrong. I didn't say that fatherlessness isn't maybe one of the biggest problems, because it definitely is. But I made a very, very long and thorough argument out of something that I thought was wrong with Sargon's statements and the ideas that he was actually putting forth. I didn't try to get him in a gotcha moment, though. You know, that's weak. That's stupid. And the people who try to do that, it's because their bark is louder than their bite. They don't have good ideas. They kind of know that. And you guys who were like doubting that, like, you know, there's a group of about 30 to 50 of us that, you know, are known for having integrity and being truth tellers. I'm one of the smallest out of those people, but, you know, people do know that I have the name that I do on YouTube, not necessarily for just being the most entertaining, and not necessarily for using using the trends. I don't do trending topics. I don't do response videos that are just going to get a lot of views. I make videos that are my videos, that hopefully people will like it because I have an insight. And so the audience that I do have apparently largely agrees with those things. And that's cool for me. And there's a number of us. There's 30 to 50 of us that are like that. Mostly are bigger than I am. And some of them are probably overall a lot better than I am, you know? And most of us, we do have this integrity. So I think it's really kind of a shame that so many members of the audience, and I don't know if it's so many members of the audience, but at least a sizable amount of audience members were able to be, they were gullible enough to actually believe that each and every one of us that was accused of something over the past couple of months by these serial liars, that maybe we had somehow done something wrong. Now, of course, these people who were lying about us, they couldn't actually, you know, make a video proving anything. It was all just rumors, things that they just repeated over and over and over. And yeah, they had to do it because their bark was louder than their bite. And I guess you guys fell for it as audience members. Like, not all of you. The vast majority of people probably didn't, but a lot of you did. And that's really a shame. Like, you listened to these people say, oh, Sargon is the soy boy, and like, oh, Jeff Holiday doxes everyone, oh, Prince of Queens is, I don't even know what they said about me. Like, honestly, the weird crap that they said about me, like, did anyone else keep track of it at all? But ultimately, it was all them barking louder than their bite, and it's like, at the end of the day, what did they prove besides that they bark a lot? And this comes up in real life too. There's people like this in real life. I've been having to deal with some of them recently. And the thing is about people with bark louder than their bite, it's not simply that, you know, they have a loud bark and then they kind of have a bite. Usually it's more like they're going to bark really, really loud, and they know that the second you fight back, they're gonna run. Because they know they couldn't take you, and they won't even try. So, yeah. I just want people to ask themselves, as audience members, do I ever fall for believing some dumb rumors? I've believed a few in the past, and I've brought it up in my videos. You know, like, the thing that comes to mind immediately is that this one guy invented I guess it was a hate crime hoax that we would call this. It's a white guy who said that he got stabbed by an Antifa guy for having the Hitler Youth haircut, and it turned out to be a hoax. He wasn't actually stabbed. He stabbed himself, and I fell for it, and I put it in a video, and that really, really sucked. There also has to be a few other things that I've fallen for, but every time it happens, I am really, 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 really mad at myself. It's my responsibility to make sure that I'm not just sort of assuming something because a bunch of people are saying it, or because somebody's saying something over and over and over, and I've never seen the evidence. You know, when people were trying to say that Jeff Holiday doxed everyone from Aiden Paladin to Coach Red Pill to Sinatra Says, and that all he does is dox people, and that he's just a big SJW, and that I'm supposed to start hating him even though he and I were, you know, casually friends. I said, I need to see evidence. And they were like, well, there's evidence. And then they linked me with a bunch of quote unquote links to evidence, and it wasn't evidence. It just wasn't. And, I was supposed to, you know, turn on him and start hating him or whatever. And because of the fact that I wouldn't, a bunch of people started lying about me, but I didn't, because I knew that that was the thing with integrity to do. And I could not be more glad about my decision, not just because, you know, when somebody's being lied about, it's really not fair to that person that they're being lied about, because people were lying about Jeff Holiday a lot, and they knew that they were lying. Don't get any illusion that people just, you know, sort of accidentally said some stuff about Jeff because he had done some stuff wrong or blah, blah, blah. No, a number of them, like a good 5-10 people probably, were actively smearing, lying about Jeff. They knew it. And, I reserved having any sort of judgment, you know, during the period of time when it was the most intense, because I just wasn't seeing the evidence. And that didn't just prove a point to Jeff, but it proved a point, hopefully, to the entire audience of all of this stuff. Like, hopefully, I'm hoping that people who watch this sit back and think to themselves, wait, Prince of Queens has integrity. He's not going to just repeat rumors, because that's the type of guy he is. And if you did repeat rumors, if you did just assume that, you know, everybody on the Kraut server was a horrible doxing monster, and like these things that were brought up over and over, and, you know, all these people joined in on throwing stones at people because it was the thing to do, and because you could get attention for doing that. You know, you could title your stream Jeff Holiday's a Doxer for a while, you know, back in late December, early January. You could title your stream Jeff Holiday's a Doxer, and you would get like 50 people watching or something. If you did do that, and you got some little amount of temporary success for that on YouTube, I know you have to be thinking back on that and kind of wishing that maybe you didn't at this point. And if you aren't, I kind of feel bad for you. And it would be the same with anybody, you know? Jeff and I were not super tight at all before this drama. I'd only hung out with him and chatted with him like 4 times or something, and only in groups. It doesn't have to do with him being some like great personal friend of mine. It has to do with my integrity and how I treat people that I have no reason to have a problem with, who I mostly am in agreement with. You know, like I have no problem with a lot of feminists or whatever, but if somebody told me that she's actually a horrible liar that doxes people all the time, well, it's a feminist. Feminists do things like that all the time. But if it's somebody that is in my sphere, who I think of as somebody having integrity, who I know is against doxing, and then all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, but they are doxing. I'm probably not going to just assume that that's the case. That's the type of guy I am. You know? Like, it would have been like that with Andy Worski. I was in one live stream with Andy Worski. I don't particularly like the guy. Never really did. Never really thought he was that smart. I watched his channel just because he would find the cringiest video every day, and it was easier to watch his channel than to search for the cringiest video every day. And it was just kind of refreshing to, you know, watch some everyman type person make fun of a very cringy SJW video. If somebody came at Andy without any evidence saying that he did all these horrible, horrible things and was trying to like get me to join on some hate Andy Worski bandwagon back in, you know, December, if somebody did that and was like, Prince, you know, go to Candy Mountain, Prince. Everybody should hate Andy Worski. Everybody should hate Andy Worski. I'd be like, I don't know anything about this. And as far as I know, he's a nice enough guy, and I don't think that he'd probably dox people. And if he did, there should probably be some evidence. So I'm not going to start hating on him, because I have no reason to do that. That's what I would have done. If somebody thinks otherwise about me, if somebody says, oh, Prince, you would totally come after people if it was somebody that wasn't your friend, or blah 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 blah, well, you're wrong, and show me an instance where I did do that. I came after Cat Black for doxing people because she did it all the time. I have the receipts. I put them in my videos. But no, I don't just hear some rumor about something that happened on the internet that I don't know anything about and decide to hate people for it. And I assume that the people who get really, really into that type of thing, I assume that they're probably wrong. I assume that their bark is louder than their bite, and that at the end of the day, everybody's going to know. And I guess now everybody does know. Huh.